Do you remember the brutal arena fights of Spartacus? Back then, the cast looked powerful on screen, but off-screen, many were hiding painful tragedies. Cancer, scandal, divorce, public humiliation, and heartbreaking loss changed the cast in ways fans never expected. This is how they changed after 16 years, and some of them are almost unrecognizable now. Lucy Lawless as Lucretia Elegant, seductive and quietly venomous, Lucretia could destroy someone's life with nothing more than a smile and a whisper. Lucy Lawless was 42 years old when she stepped into Spartacus in 2010, transforming herself completely from the heroic image of Xena into a woman driven by ambition, manipulation, and desperation. Every scene she entered felt dangerous because Lucretia never needed a sword to control the room. By the time Spartacus began, Lucy was already a television legend, but her life outside the spotlight had been far messier than many fans realized. She went through a painful divorce in the mid-1990s after becoming pregnant very young, then rebuilt her life after marrying producer Robert Tappert in 1998. In 2012, she made headlines after being arrested during a Greenpeace protest against Arctic oil drilling. Over the years, she also became increasingly vocal online, especially during her public clashes with former co-star Kevin Sorbo over politics and social issues. The last few years have pushed Lucy into a different stage of her career. Instead of relying only on nostalgia, she shifted toward producing, directing, and more mature dramatic work, including the documentary Never Look Away, which premiered at Sundance in 2024. Fans were also shocked and excited when it was announced she would return as Lucretia in Spartacus, House of Asher in 2025. As of 2026, Lucy Lawless is 58 years old and remains one of the most recognizable women in fantasy television history. Her estimated net worth is around $30 million alongside husband Robert Tappert. There is still something untouchable about her presence. The same feeling that once made Lucretia seem capable of burning Rome down while remaining perfectly composed. Andy Whitfield as Spartacus. The moment Andy Whitfield walked onto the screen, Spartacus stopped feeling like fantasy and started feeling painfully real. At 38 years old, the former engineer from Wales carried the role with a strange combination of gentleness and violence that instantly separated him from typical action stars. He wasn't just playing a slave-turned-warrior. He looked like a man dragging real exhaustion, real anger, and real love through every battle scene. What makes Andy's story so devastating is how quickly everything changed. Before acting, he worked as an engineer and only slowly built a career through Australian television, until Spartacus finally transformed his life. Then, just as fame arrived, he was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma in 2010. Production shut down as he began aggressive treatment, and for a brief moment there was hope after doctors declared him cancer-free, but the disease returned only months later. Forced to leave the role that had made him famous, Andy spent his final months fighting for more time with his wife Vashti and their 2 young children. Even years after his death, Andy remains the emotional center of Spartacus for many fans. The documentary Be Here Now later revealed the painful reality behind his final months. Chemotherapy, fear, physical decline, and the incredible bond between him and Vashti as they tried to hold their family together. The film turned him from a television star into something far more human and heartbreaking. Andy Whitfield passed away on September 11, 2011, at just 39 years old. As of 2026, his performance still feels frozen in time, powerful, unfinished, and painfully alive. For many viewers, no actor ever truly replaced him, because Spartacus died the moment Andy did. Manu Bennett as Crixus. With his scarred face, booming rage, and fearless pride, Crixus felt like the one gladiator in Spartacus who would rather die than kneel. Manu Bennett was 41 years old when he took on the role in 2010, turning the undefeated champion of Capua, into one of the series' most unforgettable warriors. Even in the middle of brutal arena fights, he carried the intensity of someone constantly at war with himself. That intensity came from real tragedy long before fame arrived. As a child, Manu survived a horrific car crash that killed his mother and brother and left him in a coma for weeks, a loss that shaped much of his personality and emotional volatility. Years later, despite success in Spartacus, Arrow, and The Hobbit, his reputation took hits after a 2015 assault arrest during Comic-Con weekend and another controversy in 2019 involving a naked haka performance in Romania. His longtime relationship with Karen Horan also ended in separation in 2017 after they had 3 daughters together. In recent years, Manu has become far more reflective and selective about public appearances. While he still embraces fan conventions and fantasy culture, there is a calmer, more weathered version of him now compared to the explosive figure fans remember from Spartacus. Interviews and social media appearances often show him speaking openly about mistakes, fame, and personal growth, rather than chasing Hollywood attention. As of 2026, Manu Bennett is 57 years old and still instantly recognizable to fans of fantasy television. His estimated net worth is around $1.5 to $2 million, but his real reputation comes from the raw physical energy he brought to every role. Even now, he still carries himself like a man who survived the arena instead of simply acting inside one. Anna Hutchison as Laeta entered Spartacus surrounded by fear, grief, and collapsing Roman power. Yet Anna Hutchison gave her a quiet resilience that made her stand out from the chaos around her. She was 27 years old when she joined Spartacus in 2013, playing a Roman captive forced to survive in a world where mercy disappeared almost overnight. She made Laeta felt like someone desperately trying to hold on to compassion while everything around her turned savage. By that point, Anna was already recognizable to audiences from Power Rangers Jungle Fury, Underbelly, and the cult horror hit The Cabin in the Woods, where she proved she could handle darker and more psychologically intense material. But one of the hardest periods of her career came years later when she took on an emotionally brutal role opposite Nicolas Cage, playing a rape victim in a disturbing thriller. Anna later admitted the role deeply affected her mentally because of the vulnerability and trauma required on screen. She also became known for taking bold roles involving nudity and highly sexualized scenes, something that repeatedly brought intense online attention and public scrutiny. In recent years, Anna has slowly shifted toward producing and independent film work while maintaining a quieter public profile compared to many Spartacus alumni. She continued appearing in thrillers and streaming projects throughout the 2020s. But her career became less focused on Hollywood fame and more centered around creative flexibility and personal balance. Interviews from recent years often show someone much calmer and more reflective than the glamorous characters she once played. As of 2026, Anna Hutchison is 40 years old and still remembered strongly by genre fans across Spartacus, horror films, and Power Rangers culture. There is still a softness in the way audiences remember Laeta, and that same feeling seems to follow Anna's career even now. Simon Merrells as Crassus. Crassus entered Spartacus like a man who already knew the war was his to win. Calm, intelligent, and terrifyingly disciplined, Simon Merrells made him far more dangerous than the loud, impulsive villains who came before him. He was 48 years old when he joined Spartacus, War of the Damned in 2013, and instead of relying on brute force, he made Crassus feel like the kind of enemy who could destroy people simply by understanding them too well. Unlike many actors, Simon's path into acting was strangely unsettled and unconventional. Born in London and overshadowed early by the rising success of his younger brother Jason Merrells, he abandoned drama school and spent time driving taxis just to save enough money to travel through Mexico, painting and drifting between different lives before eventually returning to England. Even after moving into theater, he built his reputation slowly through intense stage work rather than television celebrity like Oedipus and On the Waterfront. Preparing for Spartacus pushed him physically harder than many viewers realized. Simon underwent a punishing fitness camp and strict diet that caused him to lose over 20 pounds before filming began, transforming his body into the lean, controlled image of a Roman military strategist rather than a bulky gladiator. After Spartacus, he leaned deeper into historical and fantasy storytelling with projects like Nightfall and Dominion, continuing to build a career around men carrying authority, intelligence, and hidden ruthlessness. By 2026, at 56 years old, there is still something sharply theatrical about him. The voice, the posture, the sense that he belongs more to classical drama than modern celebrity culture. And that may be exactly why Crassus still feels so unforgettable. Simon Merrells never played him like a villain trying to look powerful, but like a man completely certain he already was. Daniel Feuerriegel as Agron. Agron began Spartacus as a hot-headed young recruit, but Daniel Feuerriegel slowly turned him into one of the rebellion's most loyal and emotional fighters. Daniel was 29 years old when he joined the series in 2010, bringing a quiet vulnerability beneath Agron's stubborn aggression. As the show evolved, his character became one of the few gladiators audiences genuinely rooted for beyond the battlefield. Away from the cameras, Daniel faced pressures far less visible than sword fights and training scenes. He has lived with a congenital heart valve condition, forcing him to carefully control the extreme physical demands required to maintain the gladiator image during Spartacus. Even after the show ended, the pressure to stay physically perfect and professionally relevant remained a constant mental strain throughout his career. The last few years have shown a more personal side of Daniel than fans were used to seeing. Since joining Days of Our Lives in 2021 as E.J. DiMera, he has found long-term television stability, but near the end of 2025 he admitted publicly that it had been one of the hardest years of his life. In an emotional social media post, he reflected on learning difficult truths about his health, weaknesses, and emotional resilience, while thanking the people who stood beside him during recovery and personal struggles. As of 2026, Daniel Feuerriegel is 45 years old and continues working steadily in television while maintaining a much quieter lifestyle than many expected after Spartacus. His estimated net worth is around $3 million. Fans who once knew him as the fierce Agron now see someone more grounded and introspective, still fighting, just in a very different way. Peter Mensah as Oenomaus/Doctore towering over the arena with calm authority and terrifying discipline, Oenomaus felt less like a gladiator and more like a living law inside Spartacus. Peter Mensah was already 51 years old when he joined the series in 2010, yet his physical presence made him look stronger and more imposing than men half his age. With his deep voice, controlled rage, and quiet grief, he turned Doctore into one of the most respected characters in the entire franchise. Unlike many actors who chased fame early, Peter arrived in Hollywood much later after originally training as an engineer and working in Canada. Starting over in a new country while trying to break into acting was difficult, especially for a black actor constantly pushed towards small warrior or authority roles. Even after appearing in massive films like 300, Avatar, and The Incredible Hulk, he remained intensely private and avoided the scandals and chaos that surrounded many action stars. In recent years, Peter has continued building a steady career through genre films, voice work, and fantasy projects, rather than chasing celebrity culture. His role in Gladiator II introduced him to a younger generation of audiences, while longtime fans still admire the discipline he has maintained physically well into his 60s. Interviews often show him speaking thoughtfully about martial arts, health, and longevity instead of fame. As of 2026, Peter Mensah is 67 years old and still carries the same commanding energy that once made gladiators freeze under Oenomaus' stare. His estimated net worth is around $5 million. Even now, he feels less like a Hollywood actor and more like the kind of man you would trust to survive the collapse of an empire. Todd Lasance as Caesar Young Caesar arrived in Spartacus with the smile of a charming soldier and the instincts of someone already learning how power corrupts. Todd Lasance was 27 years old when he stepped into the role in 2012, bringing a colder, more ambitious energy to Julius Caesar long before the character became the legendary ruler history remembers. Before Spartacus, Todd was already a familiar face to Australian television audiences through Home and Away, where his troubled bad boy character Aidan Jeffries made him one of the country's biggest young soap stars. He won a Logie Award in 2009 and seemed positioned for a massive mainstream career, but the same year also brought one of the biggest mistakes of his life. Only days after announcing plans to pursue Hollywood opportunities, he was arrested at a Sydney nightclub for cocaine possession and placed on a 12-month good behavior bond. The incident damaged his clean-cut image at exactly the moment his career was beginning to expand internationally. Instead of disappearing after the scandal, Todd slowly rebuilt himself through steady television work and more mature roles. He moved through projects like Crownies, Janet King, The Vampire Diaries, and The Flash, proving he could move beyond Australian soap fame. In recent years, he found another major audience through NCIS Sydney, where he began starring as Sergeant Jim J.D. Dempsey in 2023. As of 2026, Todd Lasance is 41 years old and still working consistently across Australian and international television. There is a very different feeling around him now compared to the reckless young actor tabloids focused on in 2009. His life also became more stable and grounded after marrying Jordan Wilcox and becoming a father to 2 children, including a son born in 2023. Viva Bianca as Ilithia. Ilithia smiled like a spoiled Roman princess, but underneath the silk and jewelry was someone addicted to cruelty, power, and chaos. Viva Bianca was only 27 years old when Spartacus premiered in 2010, yet she played the manipulative noblewoman with such unsettling confidence that many viewers found her more dangerous than the gladiators themselves. What made Ilithia unforgettable was how quickly her childish charm could twist into something disturbing and vicious. Unlike several cast members who stayed trapped in action or fantasy roles afterward, Viva slowly drifted away from mainstream Hollywood attention. The daughter of acclaimed Polish-Australian composer Cezary Skubiszewski, she already came from an artistic family, but after Spartacus, she seemed far more interested in creative independence than celebrity fame. She appeared in smaller projects like A Prince for Christmas and later surprised fans by moving into writing and producing content focused on women's voices, identity, and modern relationships instead of chasing blockbuster franchises. Then, years after many assumed she had quietly disappeared from television, Viva suddenly returned to Australian soap opera audiences in 2024 through Neighbours as Chelsea Murphy. The role introduced her to an entirely new generation of viewers who barely recognized the glamorous and psychologically twisted woman from Spartacus. Interviews around that time showed someone far softer and more introspective than Ilithia ever allowed herself to be, often speaking about storytelling, creativity, and the strange experience of being remembered mostly for one intensely provocative role. As of 2026, Viva Bianca is 43 years old and still carries the same hypnotic elegance that once made Ilithia feel impossible to trust. Her estimated net worth is around $2 million. Even now, Spartacus fans still remember the chilling way she could turn fear, desire, and violence into the same expression. Liam McIntyre as Spartacus. Taking over Spartacus was almost an impossible task, and Liam McIntyre knew it the second he accepted the role. He was 30 years old when he entered the series in 2012 after the death of Andy Whitfield, stepping into a production still grieving the man who originally defined the character. For many fans, Liam was not just replacing an actor. He was walking directly into one of television's most painful tragedies. The backlash was brutal at first. Some viewers rejected him before his first episode even aired, while Liam himself admitted the physical transformation nearly destroyed him. To match the brutal gladiator image already associated with Spartacus, he forced himself through exhausting workouts, extreme eating routines, and non-stop pressure while carrying the emotional weight hanging over the entire production. But instead of copying Andy Whitfield's performance, Liam slowly reshaped Spartacus into a colder, more battle-hardened leader, especially during War of the Damned, where the character began to feel less like a man and more like a symbol marching toward death. What happened afterwards surprised many people. Rather than becoming trapped in one iconic role, Liam quietly built a loyal fan base through gaming, voice acting, and science fiction projects. He voiced J.D. Phoenix in Gears of War 4, entered both the DC and Star Wars universes through animated and video game roles, and even leaned openly into gaming culture with live streams and online collaborations. In many ways, he adapted to modern fandom culture better than most actors from Spartacus ever did. As of 2026, Liam McIntyre is 44 years old and still closely connected to the Spartacus legacy without being consumed by it. His marriage to singer Erin Hutchison has remained unusually stable for Hollywood, free from the scandals that often follow long-running genre stars. With an estimated net worth around $5 million, Liam's story ended up becoming something unexpected, not the actor who replaced Spartacus, but the one who somehow survived inheriting him. Cynthia Addai-Robinson as Naevia. Naevia returned to Spartacus no longer frightened or innocent, but hardened by trauma and burning with revenge. Cynthia Addai-Robinson stepped into the role in 2012 at 27 years old after replacing Leslie Ann Brandt, a situation that immediately put enormous pressure on her before audiences had even seen a single scene. Many fans resisted the casting change at first, but Cynthia approached Naevia with a colder, more wounded intensity that completely transformed the character by the end of the series. Unlike several actors in Spartacus who disappeared into smaller projects afterward, Cynthia quietly built one of the strongest careers out of the entire cast. After appearances in Arrow as Amanda Waller and Shooter, she eventually landed her biggest role yet as Queen Merrells in Amazon's billion-dollar fantasy series The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. The scale of the production suddenly pushed her into global attention, but it also came with heavy online backlash from toxic parts of the fandom, unhappy with the show's diversity casting. Instead of publicly collapsing under the pressure, Cynthia repeatedly spoke about focusing on the light and not the dark, becoming one of the calmer and more articulate voices surrounding the controversy. At the same time, her film career continued expanding in Hollywood. She appeared opposite Ben Affleck in The Accountant, and later returned in The Accountant 2 in 2025, proving she had successfully crossed from television cult favorite into major studio projects. By the mid-2020s, she was balancing blockbuster fantasy, action thrillers, and prestige streaming television in a way very few Spartacus actors managed to achieve. As of 2026, Cynthia Addai-Robinson is 41 years old and still entering the biggest phase of her career rather than fading from it. Her estimated net worth is believed to be between $3 and $5 million. Looking back now, it is almost ironic that audiences once doubted her casting in Spartacus because she ultimately became one of the franchise's biggest long-term success stories. Erin Cummings as Sura. In a world filled with blood, betrayal, and revenge, Sura represented the peaceful life the character lost forever. Erin Cummings was 31 years old when she played the role in 2010, giving Spartacus's wife a warmth and tenderness that made every later act of violence feel more tragic. Before Spartacus, Erin spent years moving through television with guest appearances in Charmed, Cold Case, Star Trek Enterprise, and Dollhouse, while quietly building a reputation as a dependable dramatic actress. But her real battle arrived far away from any film set. Only months after marrying actor Tom Degnan in 2016, Erin was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma, an aggressive form of breast cancer. Almost unbelievably, her husband was simultaneously diagnosed with a severe kidney disease, turning what should have been the happiest period of their marriage into a medical nightmare. Chemotherapy, surgeries, fear, and recovery suddenly replaced newlywed life almost overnight. After surviving cancer, she launched the podcast Kappa Kappa Cancer, where she discusses illness, recovery, trauma, and survival with a mixture of humor and honesty that resonated deeply with listeners. She also continued charity work through initiatives like Mittens for Detroit, while slowly returning to acting and entertainment commentary work online. As of 2026, Erin Cummings remains cancer-free and far more vocal about health struggles than most actors connected to Spartacus. Years later, Sura is still remembered as the heart Spartacus kept chasing, while Erin herself became proof that survival stories do not always end in tragedy. Craig Parker as Gaius Claudius Glaber. Glaber never needed to shout to seem dangerous. Craig Parker played him like a Roman commander whose pride was already rotting from the inside. He was 40 years old when Spartacus premiered in 2010, and his cold arrogance made him the perfect enemy for a slave who refused to stay broken. Every time Glaber appeared, the show felt less like a rebellion and more like a personal war. Craig already had a strong fantasy reputation before Spartacus. Many viewers knew him as Haldir from The Lord of the Rings, while New Zealand audiences remembered him from Shortland Street, where his role as Guy Warner became one of his longest-running screen connections. His challenge was not scandal or collapse, but escaping the shadow of genre casting. Elves, villains, aristocrats, and powerful men who often looked polished while hiding something cruel underneath. The last few years have kept Craig surprisingly active without turning him into a loud celebrity figure. He continued returning to Shortland Street in later years, including appearances into the 2020s, and played Yuri Elwin in Good Trouble from 2021 to 2024. He also remains a familiar face at fan events, where Lord of the Rings and Spartacus audiences still treat him as part of two massive fantasy worlds. As of 2026, Craig Parker is 56 years old and lives in Los Angeles while continuing to work across television, conventions, and genre projects. His estimated net worth is around $2 million. He is not the loudest success story from Spartacus, but he has built the kind of career many actors quietly dream of. Long, flexible, and still remembered by fans from completely different generations. So that's how the cast of Spartacus changed after 16 unforgettable years. Some became major Hollywood stars, some stepped away from the spotlight, and others faced heartbreaking battles no one saw coming. Which transformation shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more Then and Now stories.